So, you know that moment, like, when you're, like, after you're done, like, taking a dump in the toilet? I wouldn't be surprised if this is the third related poop opener or poop related opener that I've used for this. I'm sorry. But it's relevant, I promise. So, you know when you take a dump and, like, you get off the toilet and then you look down into it, and this may just be a dude thing, but, like, you look down and you look into it and you're like, oh my god. Like, and you're not sure, like, whether to be impressed that your body was able to do that, or, like, if you should go to a doctor. But, like, yeah, I feel that's what the FIA did with these Formula One regulations, because frankly, I'm sick of them. And, like, I even as a Ferrari fan, it's starting to get on my nerve. Like I said, I was conflicted with them because Ferrari was doing well, but now it looks like Mercedes dominant, so I can openly criticize them. And a driver also could have very well gotten killed. We'll get to that later, but first we got to talk IndyCar, because I set this up so that I'm gonna use a joke the entire time. That isn't really funny, but is somewhat relevant to the pot. You'll hear it. Okay, I just hit the mic there. I'm sorry. So, IndyCar went to Barber this week, or this past weekend. They, as the day I'm recording this, March the 30th, they raced yesterday on the 29th. And it was a good race. I enjoyed the race. I was sitting in Atlanta in the TSA line, watching it on my phone. So that's one way to beat TSA. Well, I guess I wasn't really beating TSA times. I was just burning it. But we'll get to the neat and gritty of that. By the way, in the TSA line, maybe about like halfway through the race, this because they have the ICE agents at Atlanta, and he was just like eyeing my phone the entire time while I was looking down. Like, he was doing like the full like fucking toddler, like, on the bus thing, like, you got games on your phone. He was basically doing that. And but, like, he never said a word. Like, he was just standing there, like, menacingly. And I don't know what he was trying to accomplish there, but if he wanted to intimidate an IndyCar viewer while standing menacingly on a thing, then I guess he did his job. I don't know. That's neither here or there. I just wanted to mention it, not for any political reason, just because I thought it was funny. Okay, sorry. So practice 1, basically nothing happened. Practice 2, however, something did happen. Scott McLaughlin, driver of the number 3 Odyssey Battery Chevrolet, decided that he would experiment with a new line going into turn 1. And this line was suboptimal at best.
Some other great stories here, Will. Rita's VK.
Oh, big one, huge! That's Scott McLaughlin, and he's gone through the fence.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Scott McLaughlin did not go into the catch fence. The fucker went through it. And through this audio-only thing, I will break down what happened. So, looking at the footage, obviously all the onboard stuff was destroyed when he went through, because, like, the onboard camera, like, sits on top of the roll bar, and that was destroyed when he went through the fence. But he spun going into turn 1, and then hit the gravel, and then right towards the end of the gravel, the car hopped up a little bit, just enough for the rear to clip the top of the tire barrier, or the safer barrier, and then that basically acted as another hop, and he went ass end first into the catch fence, or through the catch fence. Obviously that was pretty scary. And then immediately, the very first thing is, oh my god, usually this is the thing that kills IndyCar drivers. Is Scott McLaughlin okay? And Scott McLaughlin was okay. He went on the radio, and like a racing driver, went on there and said, Alright, I'm fine, guys. Fuck, I'm sorry. Started immediately apologizing for spinning the car and not for the fact that he almost died. But, yeah, that was an experience. Um, Practice 3, nothing really happened. Oh, wait, no. Mick Schumacher topped one of the practices, and the commentators made a big, I think it was practice 2 he topped. And the commentators made a big thing saying that it was like the it was faster than the qualifying. There we go. It was faster than last year's qualifying. But last year's qualifying was in the rain, and so that and like this was a completely dry session, and so that doesn't really have any meaning to it at all. Yeah. Obviously the important thing is Scott McLaughlin is okay. And because Scott McLaughlin is okay, I'm going to continue to joke about it throughout the rest of the broadcast. So going into qualifying, they had the third practice, nothing happened, like I said. But going into qualifying, we had some shock exits. I guess it's not really a shock anymore with like how his season's been going so far. But Will Power decided to take the Scott McLaughlin line through during his qualifying. I forgot what turn it was, but it wasn't turn 1. I think he went through turn 1 and then he went, oh, fuck. And so he just decided to lock the wheels up instead and go into the barrier. Obviously, looking at the 2 impacts, the Scott McLaughlin wreck was a lot was a lot worse than Will Powers, but yeah. So shoot, what else happened? What happened? Alex Plo got pole because of course he did. And then Roman Grosjean made it into the Fast 6, which was a bit silly. But and obviously going into the Fast 6, having like the went in there like that, it was like yeah, it didn't really he just went last in the thing. I'm struggling to come up with words here. I'm sorry. But he came which in the Fast 6 is 6th place, so he still qualifies 6th. But yeah, that's just something to think about. Alex Plo got the pole. David Malukas starting beside him, I think. I can't be bothered to remember the rest of the qualifying. I'm not going to pull it up. During the race, we didn't actually have any major crashes or wrecks, which is unusual for Barber. And I say it's unusual for Barber because 2 years ago oh my god, it was already 2 years ago. The thing that makes Barber unique from other racetracks are the track side decorations. One of the things that's like one of the things they do. So like going into the hairpin, there's a giant ass spider, and there's like on one of the safer barriers, or like just above the safer barrier, there's like 2 like child mannequins in like Barber t-shirts, like watching the race. There's a lot of mannequins at the track, but the most famous mannequin, no doubt, is Georgina. And the reason I say it's Georgina is because Georgina fell onto the racing line during a session in 2024, and that session was the race. And of course it was fucking Scott McLaughlin too. This is no hate towards Scott McLaughlin. I just feel like he has like a thing at Barber. I think Scott McLaughlin's a good driver. I just think he has like bad juju at Barber or something. he needs to what are those fucking things? He needs to go to like one of those people with like a crystal ball and see why this is. Maybe this all started because he hit Georgina, but he hit Georgina and amputated her arm. And it is, even today, it's still one of the funniest things to watch, because like seeing this like scantily clad sex doll fall off a bridge onto the racing line, and then one of the drivers hits it. Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely cool. So yeah, that's Georgina did not fall from the bridge in 2026. None of the mannequins fell or had any impact. And it was actually turning out to be an interesting race because Alex Palou went in for the undercut on Christian Lundgaard. Christian Lundgaard and Graham Rahal, not really Graham Rahal, more Christian Lundgaard, came up as surprise contenders for the win because they had good pit strategy. And Christian Lundgaard had all of his eggs handed to him, if you know what I'm saying. Scott McLaughlin, Alex Palou went in for the undercut, and he came out, but at the same time, he was coming out with Mick Schumacher. And normally, in any other racing series, and by any other, I mean Formula 1, that's an immediate blue flag, and you have to let them by. In IndyCar, it's not. If I'm running, there's 25 cars on the grid in most of the races. I think the Indy 500 is the only one with more. If I'm running in 25th and first place is coming up to me, I don't have to give up that position until I've been lapped by the entire field. And so obviously, there's like an unwritten rule among like the IndyCar drivers, like, hey, like if the leader's coming up, you shouldn't hold him up. But when you're both coming out of pit road on that narrow entry, it's either hold your line or go into the grass, which is what Mick Schumacher did. And this held Alex Palou up. And this built Lundgaard a perfect gap, like a 27-second gap that he could use to his advantage in the pits. And so he goes into the pits, gets fuel, gets new tires. They drop the car, he dumps the throttle on it, and then immediately stops because the left rear comes off, so then they have to jack the car up again, take that tire off, put it back on, tighten it, and then send him back out. And in the time that was lost, Alex Palou managed to get by him. And so... And it's not like a thing like, oh, he may have made it. He 100% would have made it had that tire not come off. He would have cleared Palou by probably a good 4 or 5 seconds. So Palou, being Palou, he immediately began to storm off. I think he won the race by like 13 or 14 seconds. I don't remember. All I remember is during the broadcast, it cut to him crossing the finish line, which obviously like they should do. But I was really mad because Graham Rahal was fighting to stay in third place behind a hard-charging David Malukas. And David Malukas had more push-to-pass than he did. I think Graham Rahal had 8 seconds of push-to-pass compared to David Malukas' 100. And by the way, in case you don't know, push-to-pass in IndyCar, it's not like that dumbass, fuck-ass reg thing that that Formula 1 uses. In IndyCar, it's not decided by, like, fucking AI or Grok when to give you the power. The buttons, you just push the button and it gives you more power. And it's not electrical power. It's just all it does is increase the amount of air going into the turbo. So there's strategy with the push-to-pass. Because when you, like, you can use it to defend. You can use it to, obviously, like, try and pass people. But... like, obviously, with more air going into the turbo, that makes the engine work harder, and so you're burning more fuel. So it's not just, like free power, you know? Like, you got to be considerate. Obviously, when there's like 5 laps left, you're just kind of on the button, unless you're like Scott Dixon or unless you're like a fuel saving master, and you're just saving fuel. But yeah, fuck, what was I talking about? So yeah, they cut to Pelot. Pelot takes the line, and then Lundgaard takes the line, and then Graham Rahal, for the first time since the Dark Ages, gets a podium. Which, honestly, I'm not a big Graham Rahal fan, but good for him. Because, like, basically every season, like, his goal, he's always said that his goal was to get a podium for his kids. Because his kids are now at an age where they'll remember it. And he has done that. And so, I'm not saying he will, but if that truly is his one sole goal, and depending on how the rest of the season goes, if the rest of the season goes like how the first 3 races went for Graham, I wouldn't be surprised if he retires and goes on to like the pit wall. But obviously there's a lot to think about. There's a lot of talent in Indy Next right now to pick out. So yeah, that was the IndyCar race. Overall, I'd give it 3 Scott McLaughlins out of 5 Armco barriers. There we go. And now we move on to Formula 1, except we don't, because first we have to talk about Carrera Cup. If you don't know what Carrera Cup is, they race Porsche 911 Carreras. And the reason I'm talking about this is because there was a delay in the F1 start because they had to do some repair work. And that repair work was caused at 200R. So not the very first corner. I believe it was 200R. Yes, it was 200R. I have the article from Road and Track pulled up. So Masa Taga clearly saw the incident that Scott McLaughlin had in practice. I'm not sure if he actually did or not, but it's just for the joke. And went, "Hello, my name's Masa Taga. I can do better." Holy shit, that was so awful. All right, both of those were awful. Both the fact that I did the accent and the actual quality of the accent. Both of those were bad. If I'm going to do the accent, I should at least do it good. Or at least do a better job at it. But, yeah. So, Masa Taga in the number 84 C-Ref Motorsports Porsche made contact with another Porsche. These are all Porsches, by the way. Made contact with another car and barrel rolled going into 200R. Taga. I'm doing my best because all the footage I can find of the actual accident happening, is in Japanese, so that would be no use to you guys. But he comes in, going into 200R, and he gets clipped. He's in this red Porsche, and he turns in to this green Porsche, and the 84 Porsche, that's Masataga, like, goes over the number 16, like I just have the still frame here right now, and, like, his rear tire is, like, on the roof of the 16, and then that obviously causes his car to roll. He begins to roll, he hits the gravel, and that launches him up, and into the catch fence, like, full on, like, 2015 Nürburgring, Jan Marlborough nearly killed a spectator. I can joke about that because nothing happened here. Nobody was hurt. But the fence was damaged, and so they had to do repair work on it to fix the fence, and that delayed the Japanese Grand Prix by 10 minutes. And this would not be the only crash at the Japanese Grand Prix. We will get to that in a bit. But real quick, I want to bring up the pre-race ceremonies that they did during this delay. Because Formula One has been facing a lot of criticism in the last since the first race in Australia, really. Not just from the fans, but from the drivers as well. The drivers are comparing, like Charles Leclerc in Australia compared the car to Mario Kart. And then, like, I think Max Verstappen compared it to Mario Kart in a press conference. And honestly, I don't blame them, because basically when the car decides that it wants to go faster, it is like using a mushroom in Mario Kart. And I'm not a fan of it. And we'll get into that more regarding Behrman's crash with Colapinto during the race. But during the pre-race ceremonies, like, Formula One's been doing all this stuff. Like, they've been censoring the drivers. Like, Kimi Antonelli, he took the pole. And just like real footage from the Taliban, it cut off the onboard. And they said that the camera broke. And about like 15 minutes later, somebody got the full onboard. And the camera didn't break, but the car slowed down, like, rapidly going into 130R, which is, like, the corner at Suzuka. And, yeah, it is not... This whole idea of, like, super clipping, and I'll get into it. Like I said, I'll get into it later. The point that I'm getting at is that, Formula One's been doing all this stuff to say that it's not Mario Kart. And then they had all the stars from the new Mario movie, which will likely feature, as the first Mario movie had like a Mario Kart segment in it, so I wouldn't be surprised if this one does either. And they were playing like fucking Mario Kart music and joking about mushrooms and stuff. And so I just think it's funny that, like, Formula One's been doing all this censorship, and then they just shot themselves in the foot with this. Also, Jack Black waved the checkered flag. And if you miss the pre-race ceremonies like I did, and you don't know that Jack Black is Bowser in the new Mario movie, then you were probably, like, really fucking confused as to why Jack Black was at the Japanese Grand Prix waving the flag. He actually did a good job waving the flag. Compared to how celebrities normally wave the flag, he actually did a really good job. The race start, both the Mercedes just dropped off in pace like they always do on the start. The Ferraris rocketed up. Oscar Piastri rocketed up. And then, like, 10 laps later, the Mercedes took the lead like they always do. And then this is where things get interesting. There was a safety car, and that safety car was because of Ollie Behrman's crash. We'll get into that in a bit. But Ollie Behrman crashed. That brought out the safety car, and George Russell, who was leading the race, had pit literally right before the safety car had come out. And so he got screwed, and then a couple other drivers got screwed, and then Talbot Antonelli, he did not get screwed. And then the rest of the race was kind of just a snooze fest. I saw someone online call it a super DRS train, and the words that they used was that it's like a normal DRS train, except they pass, but then they can't keep the pass done. Like, it's just a DRS train with AI, basically, telling the car when to go fast. But Talbot Antonelli won by, like, 15 seconds or something like that. Again, hashtag not my Kimi. I'm a Kimi Räikkönen fan. I'm actually debating on ordering a Kimi Räikkönen cardboard cutout and putting it in my room, because I found them online for pretty cheap. I can get one for, like, $30. And so... and I know where I would put it too. I know exactly where I would put it in my room. So I just have to debate whether or not I want Kimi Räikkönen watching me while I sleep. Anyway, so yeah, it was Talbot Antonelli, Oscar Pistorius, and Charles Leclerc on the podium, and credit where credit is due, Charles Leclerc did have like a wonderful drive to recover to P3, so I will give him that. But that has been overshadowed, and rightfully overshadowed, by Ollie Behrman's crash. And I've mentioned it before, but let me pull up the exact onboard footage so I can get it right. Basically, all the drivers were warning the FIA before the first round in Australia, like, hey, this is a problem. Like, we have some cars, like, they can regenerate, and like they'll just regenerate on their own, and we don't really have much control over that, and there's going to be a collision. And the FIA basically said, like, oh, well, that's not going to happen. And it happened. It actually happened. I have the deltas here. So Colapinto was going 262 kilometers an hour in 6th gear, approaching the corner. And Ollie Behrman was going 314 kilometers an hour, approaching. So it was a 52 kilometer an hour deficit, which on a track like Suzuka, like at Monza, you maybe could get away with it, or maybe Baku, like a track with like long straights, but Suzuka, where it's just constant corners where everything just flows into one another, it doesn't work. I'd argue it doesn't work with the normal regs, or on these like straight tracks, but it's even worse at like places like Suzuka. But I remember watching it live, and I saw Behrman, and he just ended up in the wall. Like it just said there was a yellow flag, and then it cut to Behrman in the wall, and then the safety car came out. And so then I was like, oh, he just had a little off. And then it showed the replay of it, and this is like, there's not a lot of moments in like motorsport where I like physically, like, this was one of the, like, I remember watching this because I was in Atlanta at the time, so I was 3 hours ahead. So it was like 2 a.m. when this happened, and I remember like visibly or audibly going like, oh, like, I hope he gets out. Like, that's what my mom said, because we were sharing a hotel room together, me and my mother, and she said that she heard me say, I hope he gets out. But basically what happened is Ollie Behrman was closing in on Colapinto. Colapinto had the super clipping. He moves over to the right side of the track. Colapinto evasive action, or not Colapinto, Behrman evasive action onto the left side of Colapinto. He goes into the grass. The rear of the car rotates. He hits back onto the gravel, loses it, and hits the wall at, like, I think it was 50 Gs. And then, so after that replay, he did get out of the car, but he was, like, hobbling out of the car. He was visibly in pain. And it was like, oh, my goodness. And so that, I'm not even going to bring out a bitching box for this. Normally I would, but I'm not, because I'm not bitching. It's like, this is an actual safety problem, and the way the FIA is handling it, because the FIA released a statement a day later, and that made it even worse. And that statement basically came out after Carlos Sainz, Williams driver, he released, because he's the head of the Grand Prix Drivers Association. Let me pull up his statement. So Carlos Sainz in the media pen started by saying, quote, "That's the problem when you only listen to teams that they think the racing is okay because they're having fun watching it on television." He said that before his Grand Prix Driver Association. Like I said, he said that during the media pen. But from a driver's standpoint, when you are racing each other and you realize that there's a 50-kilometer-an-hour speed delta, that's actually not racing. Anyway, I really hope they listen to us and they focus on the feedback we've given them rather than only listening to the teams. And another point that he brought up is that before the Japanese Grand Prix, the FIA announced that they were doing some changes to qualifying, which really caught everybody by surprise. What he said was, that's why I was surprised too when they said, no, we'll sort out qualifying and leave the racing alone because it's exciting. As drivers, we've been extremely vocal that the problem is not only qualifying, it's also racing. Here, we were lucky there was an escape road. Now imagine going to Baku or going to Singapore or going to Vegas and having these closing speeds and crashes next to the walls. We as the Grand Prix Drivers Association, we've warned the FIA these actions are going to happen with this set of regulations, and we need to change something soon if we don't want them to happen. It was 50G, I heard, higher than my crash in Russia in 2015. I was just 46G. Just in mind what kind of crash you would have in Vegas, Baku, etc. And so Sainz said that, and a bunch of the other drivers agreed with him, basically saying it's unsafe. First off, I'd like to say Ollie Behrman is okay. He has a couple boo-boos, but other than that, he is okay, which really is a testament to how safe the cars are. I know I just went on like a tangent about how unsafe the cars are because of these closing speeds, but like the actual like structure of not only the cars, of how they're built, but the structure of the barriers and stuff, that's the really a testament. I think even like 10 or 15 years ago, this probably would have, a wreck like this may have like seriously hurt somebody. And so, and it's kind of, I don't want to bring it up too much because I've seen other people bring it up and it's not a very strong argument. But back in that was the last like major rule regulation change, was in 2014. There were some people complaining about it, like there were now. And then Joe Bianchi died. But the reason I don't really want to bring that up is because Bianchi died because of accidents from Suzuka circuit, not because of the cars. The actions done by Suzuka to bring a tractor onto the racing surface while cars were still on it, that is what killed Jules Bianchi. But people are bringing it up because that was the last time we had a regulation change like this and a driver was killed, and now we just saw a massive thing with Ollie Behrman. And like even 20 years ago could have killed a driver. And the FIA statement hasn't made anything better. Let me read it for you. So yeah, the FIA released an official statement. Since their introduction, the 2026 regulations have been the subject of ongoing discussions between the FIA teams, power unit manufacturers, drivers, and Formula One media. By design, these regulations include a number of adjustable parameters, particularly in relation to energy management, which allows for optimization based on real-world data. Okay, so real quick, before I read the rest of it, it is a bunch of corporate slop. So I will be translating it. Yeah, let's read the rest of it. There's 3 paragraphs, so on to paragraph 2. It has been the consistent position of all stakeholders that a structured review would take place after the opening phase of the season to allow for sufficient data to be gathered and analyzed. A number of meetings are therefore scheduled in April to assess the operation of new regulations and determine whether any refinements are required. And the reason I'm reading the full statement, by the way, is because I got feedback from somebody when I read the last FIA statement. I think it was an FIA statement. I went blah, blah, blah when I skipped over paragraph, and they're like, oh, well, you're paraphrasing it to make it sound better. And so because of that, now you have to hear the full FIA statement. So I won't name names, but fuck that guy. The last paragraph, any potential adjustments, particularly those related to energy management, require careful simulation and detailed analysis. The FIA will continue to work in close and constructive collaboration with all stakeholders to ensure the best possible outcome for the sport, and safety will always remain a core element of the FIA's mission. At this stage, any speculation regarding the nature of potential changes would be premature. Further updates will be communicated in due course. English translation for that last paragraph. All of our stakeholders have money on this, so we're not going to do shit until a driver ends up in a body bag. So, yeah, it is... Like I said earlier in this, like, I'm a Ferrari fan, and so, like, before, I was, like, happy that Ferrari's doing well, but, like, even if we scratch aside the whole thing of, like, Ollie Behrman potentially going to Ferrari in 2027, the whole thing with it is just fucked. Like, I don't want to see drivers, like, have to fear getting in the car. Yeah, and so that's been the big thing. Behrman almost took the McLaughlin line through there, but the barrier was just high enough where he didn't. Had he gone through the catch fence, and this is all what ifs, but had he gone through the catch fence, he probably would have been hurt more. Or maybe he wouldn't. I mean, Scott McLaughlin wasn't, but... Yeah, and the thing that I want to bring up is that everybody's talking about this, and even Carlos Sainz in the GPDA statement said that there's, like, no other racing series in the world that's like this. And, like, people online are saying that, and that's not necessarily true. Because you have the World Endurance Championship, and obviously you have those closing speeds, because you have, like, hypercars coming in, like, on GT3 cars, you know? But the GT3 cars are ordered to get out of the way. If there's, like, a lapped hypercar that's, like, 2 laps down from the leaders, it still flashes its lights, and the GT3 car is supposed to get out of the way. That's just the way it is. But F1 cars don't have flashing lights because they don't have headlights because the track is always lit, blah, blah, blah. Lightning McQueen said that. But the other thing that I want to bring up, also involving the World Endurance Championship, and now IMSA as well, because IMSA is basically North American World Endurance Championship. They use most of the same cars. Is they use a 50-50 power split too. But when you're watching the 24 hours of Le Mans, or when you're watching, like, the 12 hours of Sebring, or, like, any other, like, endurance race, or, like, any race on that calendar with these cars, there's not, like, these massive, like, super clipping moments. And the reason for that, and I believe they're similar too, I believe WEC uses, like, I think Formula 1, I think their cars use 8 megajoules of energy, and WEC uses, like, 6 or 7. I'm not exactly sure the number off the top of my head. The cars are different. I know the Aston Martin, they don't even have a megajoule at all because they just have a naturally aspirated V12, and that car sounds amazing. But you don't have these, like, massive closing speeds, and this isn't a new thing. Like, WEC has been hybrid since, I think, like, LMP1 was introduced, and that was in, like, 2012. So for almost 15 years, we've had cars in the World Endurance Championship racing like this, and they're not, like, crashing into each other. They're not having, like, these massive super clipping moments. They're not doing that. And the reason for that is partly because the teams kind of shot themselves in the foot on this, but this is also kind of the FIA shooting themselves in the foot. And I'll explain why in a bit. But in Formula 1, you're only allowed to get... And this is why you're seeing the car spin a lot going into corners. Like, during the... It's not happening as much because the driver's starting to figure it out. But, like, during testing, like, I think it was Bahrain at, like, turn 10, they were spinning a lot. It was because they'd have, like, full energy, like, in the battery. And then like after braking, because turn 10's a heavy braking zone. And then because of that, like the brakes are weird. The axle, the way the energy is recaptured is that it recaptures it from the rear axle. And so that's why there's like active movement on the rear axle, obviously apart from the fact that it's spinning, but there's movement with parts like collecting the energy. I believe there's a like a little turbine in there, like a little magneto, or not a magneto, like something similar to like how an alternator works, but probably like $5 million because it's Formula One. On that axle, and it's spinning, and that's generating power. But if you have a full battery, then that power has nowhere to go, and it just kind of stays there, and then that's why the cars are spinning. Anyway, point I'm getting at is that Formula One, right? I think it was in 2025, the teams vetoed a thing basically saying, hey, we can't let this happen because Audi will have an advantage. And to be honest, Audi probably would have an advantage because they do race in Le Mans. But Formula One only recollects the energy from the rear axle, while in the World Endurance Championship and in IMSA, like on the Porsches and the Ferraris, like the hypercars, they collect it on the rear and the front axle. And so the big thing is that obviously, like I said, the teams vetoed potential energy recollection from the front axle to allow for like Audi not to have an advantage, because Audi is really dominant, or was really dominant at Le Mans. But that's kind of where the teams shot themselves in the foot. But the FIA has shot themselves in the foot because they've come out and they've said, like, we can't change that. Because, like, the big thing was, like, obviously the two oil money Grand Prix have been canceled because of the war in Iran. And the big thing is, it's like, okay, we now basically have, like, a month break before the next race in Miami. So what are you going to do about it? Like, you could do this. And the FIA said, no, we can't do this. And the reason they gave for not allowing energy recollection on the front axle is because it would give the drivers an unfair advantage. They're saying it would act as like an electronic driver aid, so that you could put in like traction control on the wheels. And I don't blame them for saying that. I mean, the World Endurance Championship has traction control, but they don't have like ABS. Well, the GT3 cars have ABS, but none of the other cars, the LMP2s and the hypercars, don't have ABS. And the GT3s had ABS for a while, long before the rule set came in. But, and I understand where they're getting at, because these are supposed to be like the 20 best drivers or 22 best drivers in the world. And, you know, like, oh, they don't need traction control, they don't need ABS, they don't need like these electronic driver aids. But at the same time, like, I hear the FIA say that, and it's like, okay, but do they need, like, grok to decide when to have the car slow down by 50 kilometers an hour on a high-speed part of the track to recollect energy? And that's my argument, and that's a lot of people's argument. It's not just fans, but drivers and, like, people in the paddock. Like, it's, at what point does the, like I said, like, the FIA, they're really hell-bent on these regs, but somebody's going to get hurt. And I don't want to see that, but somebody's going to get hurt. And the whole reason, it's like, well, what would regeneration at the front axle? What am I getting at? All right, what would regeneration at the front axle even bring? All right. Well, like I said, in the World Endurance Championship and in IMSA, they have regeneration on the front axle, so they basically have twice the ability to regenerate when they're under braking. And so, because of that, they don't need to super clip like the Formula 1 cars do. I fucking hate the term super clipping, by the way. It makes it sound better than it is. But yeah, like I said, the FIA is hellbent. They're not going to do that because, it gives them driver aids. But like I said, I mean, isn't Grok having a fucking electronic system in there deciding when to go fast and when not to? Is that any better than traction control or ABS? I'd argue not. I would rather have, and I think I speak for a lot of people here, I would rather have a racing series where it's actual, like, bumper to bumper racing, and like the passes are real, but they have like traction control, versus like what we have now with these fuck ass regs. And and this isn't even the first time. In the 2000s, like, everybody points to the 2000s, like, oh, bring back the V10s, bring back the V10s. And the V10s had traction control. And it's not even like, oh, some of the cars had it. No, all of them had it, and you can hear it. Like, every time you're watching, like, these races, and it wasn't just the V10s either. In the V8 era, like, 2007, 2008, which, by the way, produced, like, incredible racing, 2006 as well. Like, anytime you hear the cars, like, coming out of a corner, and they start going, like, that's not just because of the exhaust, that's because of the traction control in it. But we had good racing with that. And so, and like I said, I understand the argument for not having traction control. And I understand the argument for not having, like, driver aids. But if you're so hell-bent on having a 50-50 split, you have to do it right. And the World Endurance Championship does it right. And IMSA does it right. And Formula 1 is not doing it right. In conclusion, I have to wrap this up because I've got stuff I gotta do. But yeah, I'm just gonna end it here. I can't even think of I'm actually pretty mad right now. I like just festering on this thought. It's making me angry. So I'm probably just gonna sit on the couch and like watch TV or something. Watch like slop on the television to calm me down. In conclusion, Formula 1 needs to get rid of these fuck-ass regs, and the Scott McLaughlin line will now be a term that I regularly use on the broadcast. See ya.